Welcome to another episode of Behind the Strategy, challenging your perspective, motivating your mind, and simplifying your strategy.
With today's inspiring guest sharing what's behind their own strategy, so you can boost your business and love your life that little bit more.
Make sure you pop that subscribe button and share with someone who needs this today. Fresh out of the lab, because it's the cleanest day off, your host, Kate Whitley.
Thank you. I do like to keep the place clean and make myself useful. But I'd like to introduce you to the most loveliest of guests today, the fabulous Natalie Trusdale. So welcome Natalie. What I love about you and why I was so keen to get you here behind the strategy in the podcast is because you are one of the nicest people I've ever met. Seriously, you really, really are. So welcome, first of all.
Thank you. That's very kind.
The main reason I believe that you're so nice is because you're honest. You think about things. We've done clubhouse rooms together. We've been in different situations. You really want to see people do the best they can and feel the best they can about themselves. And it is so very clear because you don't just jump in and try and help people like I do. I jump in and go, oh, I can help you. I can do this, that and the other. You think about things, you take it all in, you think about it, you weigh it up. And then when you give the feedback or when you talk to somebody, it's so on point. You really have insight into people, Natalie. Do you think that's right? Am I right? Or are you making it all up?
I like to believe that you are right. Yeah, absolutely. No, I do appreciate it. Yeah, particularly in Clubhouse, it can be very much like, oh, I want to say something. And I'll always be quite mindful of like, is what I've got to say the right thing right now for that person? But you never jut in with anything that is not absolutely perfect anyway.
No, well, the thing is, you work in a world where it's to do with the self-worth. And that's an industry, a niche, a mindful place to be because we don't always know how somebody's feeling. And the decisions that they make through their life, all our lives, are all based on our self-worth, aren't they?
Absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think whenever we're doing something or not doing something, as the case might be, there's generally a reason behind it, isn't it? There's something that's driving. And yeah, my mission is just to help people to do what they want to do and to kind of know that they're capable of doing things and knowing the true worth, as corny as that completely sounds.
Yeah, no, because self-worth, how we feel about ourselves. I mean, the online space, it's all about being visible and getting out there and reaching people. You can't, it's not like being a shop's front, is it? Where, we have our corner shop or we have our shop on the high street and people can either walk in and out and it's all about what they're going to buy from us, what they're going to engage in is based on the products, the services, what we sell, right? Not who's standing behind the counter. Yes, they may make decisions based on, is this shop or is this product eco-friendly or the budget? But it's not about us as a business owner. The online space, that's quite brutal. That changes things, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's quite frightening. Like sometimes I remember when I first set up about a year and a half, maybe a couple of years ago now, people are buying you. And I'm like, oh my God. I think sometimes when people say it, they don't realize how, for me, who past history is very much really negative body image, really low self-esteem, I was like, oh my God, to me, hearing that was like the scariest thing I'd heard in a long time. And it brought up so many past thoughts and beliefs that I had to kind of work on. And it's like we're showing up as us. So if we don't like or we're unsure about some aspect of ourselves, then that's going to hinder how we show up because we're so full of like that fear of judgment, that fear of like one of my big fears, and I still have to quash it at times, is that fear of looking silly. The idea of embarrassing myself is something I have to kind of like power through all the time, and things never disappear. It's about just knowing that in spite of that, we can show up and no one's going to die. It's like we are going to be okay, and it's about pushing past that. But yeah, the idea that we need to show up can be really, really daunting, can it?
Yeah, and the thing is, it does. I mean, for most kids are not on the internet all day. Okay, some are. No, but they're not. You grow up, you go through school. I mean, we definitely did. The internet is a newer thing, and the whole onslaught of how social media is used is absolutely incredible. The connections we can create around the world, bringing people together. I know there's an adverse effect as well, where people can pretend to be somebody else and hide behind things. But that aside, it has opened up a lot more opportunity. It's the type of thing if we're not used to. So when I was in school, I was actually quite bright, believe it or not. I was one of the bright ones. I'd like to say. I'm going to say this. I was one of the bright ones, right? However, I very rarely put my hand up because the couple of times that I did, peers would think I was a know-it-all, a show-off, or they started to set the scene for me about what was acceptable and what wasn't. And I know we have different things that go on in our homes, and that's not necessarily what I mean about self-worth, because that's dependent on our parents. I'm talking about being in a public place, because that's where we are on the internet, isn't it? Yeah. And so my first memories of being in a public place, which would have been school, when I was very young, I was able to communicate quite well and engage with people, but that also had expectations placed on me to be more sensible. And it also meant that others saw me as being somebody who thought she was better than she was. I don't know quite what that means, but those were phrases that were thrown around. So from a very young age, that's where vision of myself and my self-worth started. Now, would you say that was the same for you? And also, would you say that that's the same for the people that you work with? When you start unpacking what's going on, would you say that those very early steps of self-worth begin with our being thrown into the world? How dare they throw us into school with people? I had to grow up with children.
Exactly. No, you are, honestly, you're completely bang on. Like, I don't think, including myself, I know anyone that I've worked with who, when you kind of pull it all back, it doesn't come to somewhere either in the home environment, just kind of like you can't express yourself, but so many people, whether it's bullying at school or just like the expectations at school and the pressure is massive. Like, much like you, my experience of school were, again, I'd like to say, I thought I was one of the intelligent ones. You end up playing this or that game, don't you? Like, well, you can be really intelligent, but you can't really be really intelligent and be one of the cool kids. And you can't really be one of the sporty people, an intelligent person. Like, it was like you had to choose, isn't it, between things. So I would find that I, for want of better words, I dumbed myself down because the people who I hung around with like to mess around more. So I would dumb myself down. I wouldn't speak up. And I think we start to mold ourselves into the version of ourselves that we think is going to prosper. You know, it's like that survival thing, isn't it? If I behave like this and I talk like this and I hang around with them and I look like this, then I will do better. And what happens if we leave school like with all these insecurities?
Yes, absolutely. Because that is crucial, forming identity, isn't it? I mean, we're going right back to forming our identity, stepping into who we think. And it's about we'll do better. And that do better could just be we'll do better in school because we fit in. And it doesn't mean we do better academically. It just means we do better within our emotional self, because that's where the self-worth comes from, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's really hard to get the balance, isn't it? Because I think depending on what we are shown is important, isn't it? Because like some of us are growing up in environments where it's really important to be intelligent, to get good grades, and that pressure comes. Like I know people who now really struggle when they don't do well at things, because for them to not do well in something means they aren't a good enough person. And then you get other people who are like, you have to look this way, you have to have this particular body shape to do well. And therefore, as we all know, when you leave school and hormones change and life changes, your body does not stay like it did when you were 15.
No.
So then every time that changes, oh my God, my worth changes. And we attach our worth to all these external things that we're shown growing up. And my big thing is getting people to come back to actually your worth has nothing to do with anything external. It never changes. Your worth is exactly the same now as it was the very day you were born. And it's just getting people to realign with that and understand that it doesn't matter what someone else is saying is important. We're always worthy. We're always capable of doing things. And I think we've just got to remind ourselves of that.
That's very tricky to unpack, isn't it? Because we are innately, as human beings, all our being and instincts and brain is keyed up for survival, right? Based on thousands of years ago. I often talk about the saber-toothed tiger, but it's inside us. We need to know, is there a saber-toothed tiger, right? What is that going to be? Do we need to run? Do we need to fight, flight, or freeze? So if we freeze, you're likely to be eaten up. So that's what our bodies and that's what our brains, that's what our whole being is looking out for. Because in the first formative years, our brain gathers all the information to create what we need to survive in that environment. learning however many languages we need, or whether we're in a seasonal cold. If you're in a war zone, and I don't mean literally, I mean also within families, it could be a bit of a war zone, an uncertain environment. Your brain develops so that you can cope with that. And that's quite often where some of the anxieties come from, because the brain does it by default. So the first thing our brain does is it has to visually see, assuming we are not visually impaired, we go by what we see. Our instinct straight away is by what we see. And that also relates to what people tell you online when you're promoting yourself. First 3 seconds are the most important. So what do you see followed straight away by what you're hearing, right? And that we sum up. Now, as that person carries on talking, or as we're in a conversation, your brain starts to weigh up, and it's constantly calibrating. Is this a nice person? Is this not? Somebody stops you in the street to ask for directions. Your first thing's like, oh, you visually move. Oh, and you might have a jump. Go, yes, I can help you, and you're wanting to help, but you're also assessing the situation. Natural thing to do, right? Showing up online, we do attach validation of who we are as to whether those people don't visibly flinch. And I use that with air quotes, because that could be people just don't follow you, don't like you, make a comment. So am I making sense here, Natalie? Because that's a very, very tricky thing to unpack. We do validate ourselves by what we first look like. It's the first thing. How do we shift past that?
It's a difficult question, isn't it? But I think you are completely what we see or how we kind of guide things, isn't it? It's how we make judgments of whether we're safe, whether we're okay, and we make those decisions. And I think the first thing that we all need to understand is that all of those things are guided by your own beliefs. So me and you can be in exactly the same situation, surrounded by exactly the same people, and I'm going to see it differently than you. I'm going to hear different things to you, because what I'm doing is I'm looking at with my little own personal beliefs and judgments and biases and all those things. I've got those glasses on, and I'm looking around and I'm making judgments. I'm deciding that person's dressed that way, they must be like this. That person's just said something negative to me because I'm only picking up negativity because I'm feeling insecure. When we're starting businesses and we hit that live button, which is honestly the most nerve crack, like I even went live in my free group and I hadn't been live over the summer holidays, and I was getting a bit sweaty before I went on, and I go live every week in there, but we just get out of practice. So when the very first time we hit it, we think we're worried, like, what are they going to think of me? Are they going to think I look disgusting? Are they going to think I sound stupid? Are they going to think, who is she to be saying this? And all of those things, when we need that validation from other people, it's because really we haven't got it from ourselves yet. So the big thing to work on is that self-acceptance. And I always talk about acceptance, like body acceptance, self-acceptance. We've got to know that, you know what, I can show up and I could make an absolute dog's dinner of a life, but it doesn't make me stupid. It doesn't make me a failure. It just means I can just go, right, guys, not sure what that live was about. Let's try that again. And it's okay. And I think the big thing is to understand that often what's going on in our heads is only going on in our heads. It's not, most people aren't thinking it. And if you've got people in your world who are making the nasty comments, who are saying, you are stupid, you shouldn't show up, then it's really detaching ourselves from the fact that that is not about, I know it's hard to do, but that is not about me. That is completely about them.
That is so interesting, because what I'm taking from that is it's our own perceptions of how we see ourselves. Our perception of ourselves is based on our beliefs, you've said. Those beliefs are also entangled with values. My question is not just for you, it's for anybody, is those values that we have, are they ours? Where do they come from? And that goes back to when you were at school, you were told if you spoke up, then you would not be a good person, or something would be wrong if you were intelligent. Bringing that perception into the online space, when you show up and you want to do a live, or you're doing a talk, or you're recording a video, and you're giving inspiration, you're giving knowledge, you're giving tips, quite often we feel like we have to over deliver just to prove that we are justified in having that knowledge ourselves. It's okay to have this knowledge. I'm okay. I'm not a horrible person. I just happen to have this knowledge. Look, I studied here. I've done this. Look, I can prove it. It's almost like we're trying to tell those kids back at school, because we've let them sit in our heads and we've let their values of what self-worth is permeate through, and we've brought them with us, haven't we? Yeah. You must see that so often in your membership, in the people you work with, your clients. You must see when they sit and talk. I know many of them, probably conversations where they literally just break down, and you can hear that's where those values have come from.
Yeah, so often we'll hit 40s and people will say to you, what is important to you? And you'll be like, well, and we'll list off all these things. Oh, you know, it's success, it's family, it's freedom. We like say all these like things. And when you actually then pick it, you say, okay, so what is it about that? People are like, oh, I don't know really. Because like you said, if we're moving through life and put other people first, we have that low self-esteem, we have that word that's entangled in the needing other people to approve of us, then what happens is like other people are more important. And what happens is we end up entangling ourselves with other people's values. I mean, how many times have we ended up maybe in a relationship with someone and then we just thought like, I have completely lost myself. Like to be fair, like we have kids, we sit in a period of time just after we've had kids thinking, who the hell am I anymore? Like, where am I in this? We lose ourselves and we start to see ourselves just in one certain way. And I'll always say to people, come back to what are your actual values? Like what is, and that changes. So like my values right now, 40, are very different to what they were at 35. They're very different to what they were at 30. They're very different to what they were at 20. And we've got to check in with ourselves because as we move forward, like when I want to set up a business, my values are a different place than when I want to start becoming a parent. I have different wants and desires. And I think we've got to regularly check in with that and go, right, okay, so what values have I got right now? What beliefs have I got right now? And like you say, Kate, 100% right. And which of these are mine? Like, which are the ones that I actually believe and want? And which are the ones that I'm holding on to? Which are the ones that I just think I should have? And honestly, just get rid of them. Literally just start like, obviously you can't just stop having beliefs, but really think, man, I'm going to make conscious effort and I'm going to commit to myself to get rid of those because those are not in line with who I am right now. Like, we're ever changing as people. And I think we've got to check back in with ourselves quite often.
Yes, very important. It's about the measure of success, isn't it, within ourselves? What do we see as being successful, acceptable, or we all want to do well. We all want to do well at life. We want to be the best parent. We want to be the best daughter, wife, husband, uncle. We want to be the best friend. We want to do the best we can. We want to be the best in our business. We need to grow our businesses. We need to make an income. So we have to be very good at what we do or people aren't going to buy anything from us. Whether you have a shop, whether you have an online business, you have to have a measure of success. So measuring our own success, other people's values, like you've said, that means that our goals and our outcomes, they're not necessarily going to be aligned with our own core beliefs, are they? Right, if that's the case, are we going to be 100% motivated and invested in getting to that outcome, to getting to that goal, to achieving it? Does that mean that it's going to be more of a struggle and it's going to be harder to motivate ourselves?
Yeah, I would say 100%, like particularly on a business side. And I know for myself, since I set up, when I've allowed myself to get swayed by that person who knows exactly how I should run my coaching, who's got a really great idea of what I should do. And sometimes when we're starting up in business, we are like, I can know all I want about self-esteem, body image. Setting up, I didn't know that much about business. So I'm all ears, I'm taking things in. So we get guided by people. And then what happens is, we sit further down the line. I remember at one point, maybe a good few months ago, thinking, I'm really not enjoying what I'm doing right now. And at that point, so many of us think it's because it's not working. It's because I'm not doing it right. It's because I should just stop. And we like sack it all off and we stop the business. And really, it's because I'd completely moved away from my values of being a caring person, of being thoughtful, of being there. And I'd moved into more of like business strategist, and it'd all become a little bit cold. And therefore, when I'm showing up, I didn't feel, in other words, used authentic, isn't it these days? But I didn't feel authentically myself. So I was showing up and I wasn't feeling comfortable. And that was making me not want to show up. And it was making me dislike what I was doing. I had to sit back and go, right, okay, what is going on here? Like, I need to move back. Whether it means I progress in my business slower, whether it means my financial success, it doesn't matter. I mean, I don't really work on like financial goals. So many people say, I want to get a 5K month, whatever, that's fine. Go there. But for me, if that was going to be a target of mine, I'd rather that took 5 years if I get there being myself and showing up in a way that lights me up, than get there in 6 months in a way that, to be honest, is exhausting. You're behaving in a way that just rubs against you and there's that internal conflict going on. And that internal conflict tells you, I'm out of alignment. This is not working. And one of the key things that when you said there before about showing up, being our best when we do things, we absolutely do. And the thing is, what many of us don't realize is that our best isn't perfect. Like, and that's what we need to separate that from. And our best is different every single day. Like, my best today was different to my best yesterday. We can only work with what we've got at that time, what we've got going on in our lives. So I always say to people, like, you don't have to be a 10 out of 10 every day. If you wake up and maybe you're not feeling well, maybe you've had a rubbish night's sleep like me last night, maybe you've done this and you've done that, or there's something going on, and your mental health's playing up, and you just think to yourself, do you know what? I feel like today I can only be a 7. Then I'm like, well, damn well, go out there and be the best 7 out of 10 you can be today, and do that. And like, just literally, so every single day, maybe just ask yourself, like, okay, what am I going to be today? And then go out and do the best that day. And it might feel like better than yesterday. It might feel like not as good as yesterday. It doesn't matter. Like, every day, just show up as best you can in that moment.
That's amazing, Natalie. And you've really hit a nail on the head there as well, because you said about when people start up or when people go through their business, to be able to do that showing up. I think what happens is quite often we get advice from people, like you said, you get caught up in the strategy. You need to know some tech stuff. You need to pay somebody else to do it, if not, but you need to at least talk to them, and you need to have a fair understanding of stepping into that strategic world to a point to be able to run your business. But I think what happens then is that we start looking around, taking tips and getting advice, and we start believing that those people know more about what we do in our business, not just how we set it up and put it up there and go show up. And so that's where the self-worth and our beliefs come in about, are we good enough? Because most people don't know the best about for you to how to run your business. They may be very successful at coaching, at selling whatever it is, and they may be extremely good at that. And they can give you mentorship, guidance, advice into how things have worked for them and what they've seen around them. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's always going to work for you, because you know how to coach and speak to your clients, right? You know the type of audience you have. You know what they like and what they don't like. And if you don't, then you have to go and research that. You have to find that out. Yeah. So when somebody comes along and helps you try and set up a program, a course, something like that, they're going to give you tips and ideas on how to present it. I think we blur within ourselves and we start thinking they know more on how to deliver it to our audience than we do. And there's a difference between the practicalities of how we show up and deliver to what actually goes on and how we deliver with our core points, what we're teaching, and how we're speaking with our audience. Your niche, your clientele is mindset based. It's a fragile place to be. You can't just show up and go, right, got some great tips for you here, folks. Do this, do this, do this. And, you know, this is how you're going to have a great day. You can, but we know, like you've said, you just hit the nail on the head. You're going to be different every day. So some of those tips are going to work one day and some of them are not. What you're not doing is turning around and saying, well, if you just followed all those tips, you'd have been having a better day. Because it's a load of absolute rubbish. It really, really is. But I think we blur those lines. I think sometimes when we're setting up, we're working through life, when somebody has knowledge, we start thinking that they have more knowledge in all areas of our lives. And I know I certainly did that and experienced that, setting up different things online. Would you say that that sort of sums up what you were talking about? Do you think that happened to you, the blurring of those lines as well for you?
Yeah, absolutely, completely. Because I think, we forget that we are the best at being ourselves. And that's where we end up comparing ourselves all the time. Like, I spent a long time trying to be like, show up like somebody else. Because what we see someone being successful and we go, oh, well, they dress like that. They talk that way. They do it this way. They do this. And then we go, that's what I have to do. And yeah, you might take little things. I always say, like, don't compare for destruction, like compare for development. So if I'm watching someone and I think, I really like how they're showing up, their audience is really engaged, I really like how she's putting that across, I'm going to take little tips and tricks and I'm going to maybe use them. And that's great, do it. But I'm not going to try and emulate someone else. I'm not going to change how I talk. I will not do on here, but I can be a bit of a swearer. So what I would do is I would try not do that all the time, because I'm thinking, oh, well, I don't want to offend anybody, and then they don't want to work with me. So I was like changing how I talk and how I show up. I was trying to be more professional, which sounds terrible, isn't it? But I'm quite a relaxed person, particularly in the area that I work in. For me, that's what people want. I don't want to go and work on my mindset or my self-esteem with someone who feels like they've got a little rod up the bottom or something. I want to work with someone who I honestly feel like I could go for a wine with. Like, that's the kind of person who I want to work with. So for me, that's who I want to work with. I want to attract the people who want to go for Pinot Grigio with me, or sip on a French martini and hang out, and yes, support them, but have fun along the way. So if I'm following someone who is successful in their own right, in their own way of being themselves, and I try and emulate that, then I am not being true to myself. And every time I do that, I knock my self-esteem more.
Yes.
Because I'm not allowing myself to show up as myself.
Yes, that reminds me of how I was growing up. I think it was for a lot of people. I went to lots of different schools. I got told, oh, you speak too posh, or people made assumptions based on how I spoke. We had no money, nothing. We didn't have any money. They were all going off on holidays each year. We didn't. The assumptions and the perceptions were totally out of whack. Now, on one hand, and I'm sure many listeners, many people have experienced that for however it was for them. I just thought that people were quite stupid because they couldn't just see what was real. They just took things at face value. So I grew up, and now I know that I have ADHD. I'm also like, I can be quite judgmental, and like in an instant, probably as a child was even worse. I don't mean that in a sort of a negative way. It's based on the survival thing. How am I going to get along? So on one hand, I thought, right, okay, perceptions, people don't always see it. And I was very obsessed with trying not to be misunderstood, because I didn't want people to have the wrong idea about me. I wanted them to know who I was. I wanted to be. So I started to test out different versions of myself. And I think everybody does that to a point, don't they, in different situations. We test out who we can be and who we can't be as part of identity. What it also did was it helped me become that chameleon. Now, I don't know whether that was a good thing or not, because on one, I could fit into any situation. And you said that you did that as well. You said that you would go, okay, I need to speak like this. I need to know this. I need to hold up. I need to look like this to fit in, to get on well. We carry that through as adults. We go into a new job in an office. We instantly want to know, what's the dress code? That's one of the first things. What's the dress code? Because we want to make sure that we fit in and get on and follow company policy almost, not just self-worth. We want to do that. And that the dress code sets the scene, doesn't it? It sets the environment. And I think a lot of us do have those chameleon abilities. We can do it. But if it doesn't sit right, I mean, I guess I'm alluding to how many people over the last 20 years, especially in this internet revolution, and not just for financial reasons, have suddenly gone, I can't wear this tie and suit anymore. I can't be this teacher anymore. I can't do this anymore. I started this out with passion. I loved what I'm doing, but it's now become something else. And that's what we talked about earlier, isn't it? That sudden realization that this is not right for me. And now I worry sometimes that people then think, well, everything I've done up till now was wrong. I need to go forward now and do everything right. And I see that quite a lot. I'm sure you do as well. That worries me sometimes because it isn't wrong. You said you had a different viewpoint, different values in your 20s, your 30s, and now you're heading in your 40s. Me too. Were my perceptions wrong 20 years ago? Quite possibly, yes. But does that mean that I can't show up now as being somebody else? It's a struggle, isn't it, Natalie? You must see this as well. People start to grow and change, and then they have a new stepping out of the comfort zone. Oh my gosh, now I'm being me. Are people actually going to like me now? We've just brought the feelings of self-worth forward with us. That's a very tricky place to be, isn't it, when you're going through growth and personal development?
It is. And the thing is, like, we're always going, and I suppose it's like for another conversation, is that it's, whether we have like the fixed mindset or the growth mindset depends on whether we think we can change, doesn't it? Whether we think we can, intelligence, our abilities are something that is changeable or not. And I think we're always only learning. And I'm a strong believer in we only know what we know. So we can only ever make decisions. And a lot of times our beliefs we hold are only based on the things that we've been told and shown. And so often the initial battle I'll have, well, I would say battle with the women I work, we don't wrestle or anything, but the big thing, they're so hung up. And I know that I've done this and this is who I was and this is who I am. And we hang on to that, like we hang on to these past things or the past thoughts we've had, and we shame ourselves and we guilt ourselves. And that is so not helpful. We all, I'm pretty sure we've all in our past maybe done things, said things, made decisions, had judgments that in hindsight we think, oh my God, that's pretty horrendous. That doesn't make me a horrible person. Like, we have to detach ourselves. Like, sometimes we say hurtful things. It doesn't make us a hurtful person. Sometimes we do bad things. Doesn't make us a bad person. If we go out and do a good deed today, it doesn't make us a good person and better than anybody else. Like, we are bigger than that. We are, and often we take these snapshots, don't we? Oh, in that moment, I was like this. And we use that as like a massive guide to who we are as a person. It differs all the time. Like, sometimes I am loving and caring and thoughtful, and sometimes I'm a blooming nightmare, and I'm impatient and I'm crabby and I'm stressy. Sometimes I'm a great mum. Sometimes I question really whether I'm like the worst mother in the world. We all do it, and we're so hard on ourselves. And honestly, one of the key things, like aside from the acceptance bit, is to just be blooming kinder to ourselves. We are so tough on ourselves, and none of us deserve it. We've just got to give ourselves a bit of a break.
That is so true. And I see quite a lot recently people saying it's about being in competition with ourselves and not other people. Accepting that every day we feel differently, accepting that some days we're going to be Crabberson and then the next day we're going to be the kindest, sweetest old lady and the kindest, loveliest person ever. No. We are fluid, we are changing, we are just humans. So I guess, like you said, looking at the strategy behind how we set and fix and evaluate and move forward with our self-worth, what's been coming up is acceptance of who we are. And I think that starts with accepting who we were up to this moment in time right now, right?
Yeah.
And then once we've done that, having the confidence to then do a double acceptance. This is me, this is who I am. But no, come on, let's have the confidence to really say, this was me, own it. This was us, this was our life, warts and all. We have made great decisions. We've made very poor decisions. And you've said we can only base them on what you know. Now, if we made decisions that were not so nice, do you know what? Every single person has done that. Every single person has done that for a decision that they've made because of how they're feeling. It's an emotional feeling. They're feeling hurt, so they want to lash out and hurt somebody else. They don't just mean physically. So they'll go out of their way to say a nasty comment to get their own back. I'm like a little mini version of revenge. Sometimes it might make us feel better. You know what? Someone's been rude to us in a shop and you turn around and you're rude back. You walk away, you feel, I told them. Having that, all the other aspects of our life as well. And it's about being able to accept that. You said as well, it's about who you want to hang out with. And I think it's who do we hang out with? Who do we surround ourselves with? Quite often we can't always choose a lot of the people we hang out with. And therefore, their values, beliefs, perceptions, judgments, comments are going to be there. How do we move forward with that? So bringing that into the strategy for how we are and feel ourselves, feel about ourselves online, in our business, showing up, stepping into life, into whatever we do, going back to being visible, there are so many core messages and so much conditioning going on around us, especially in the niche that you are in about body self-worth and how we feel about our bodies. We see the successful people looking like this. We see the people who are making it. Now, my question is, are we thinking to ourselves, well, they're being successful because they're confident in themselves, and they're confident in themselves because they look good, because they're slim, because they have long hair, because they have whatever. And we sometimes base it on looks. hear so many people who have come up from rags to riches. So we can't blame it on the fact that they were handed down money, although some people have been. It's a different category. I don't mean that. Why is it that somebody who's in a similar position to ourselves, why are they suddenly steaming ahead with success and doing really well, and then we're not? And then we look to them and we think, well, we should be doing that. And we bring in these shoulds. We start doing really well. And then all of a sudden, it might not be moving fast enough. It might not be moving quick enough. But we don't know what's going on in other people's worlds, do we? We don't know all their struggles, do we?
No, there's not a single person who is successful in whatever way we deem success. And we're looking out into the world and we're looking for all these successful people, whether that's how they look or how much money they've got in the bank or whether what relationship status they're in, how many kids they've got, whatever, you know, whether they have a yacht, whatever we're looking out. Because we're looking out, aren't we? We're looking for our markers of success. So we're looking out into the world and we're going, let's find the people, and they'll be the only people we see, who have that mark of success. And the key thing is like not a single person, regardless of whether they've landed upon it and they've been lucky and all of a sudden like it has just fallen in, they've still got their own insecurities, they've still got their own issues, they still work through their own stuff. But I'll always say to people, and this like it comes back to the acceptance thing as well, a lot of time we struggle to make the changes because we don't sit and look at our own judgments. So when I'm looking out into the world and I look at someone and say I see someone like Amy Porterfield. So we see her, she always looks really nice and she speaks really confidently. If I'm looking out into the world and I'm saying to her, I'm saying that, well, that's all right for her because she's had these options. She's really beautiful. Her skin's gorgeous. She dresses really well. She's got more money so she can show up like that. Then what I'm doing as a woman is completely downplaying her success. I am judging her and basically I'm turning around and saying she doesn't work hard for it. If you think about it, like going back to like on the appearance level, so if someone was to look at me or look at someone else and look at you and just go, do you know what, they're successful and the only reason they're successful is because of how they look, how insulting is that? Like how insulting is it of us to minimize their hard work, to minimize their intelligence and narrow them down to that? And when we do that with the people, we're going to do it with ourselves. And I think one of the big ways to be able to do it is to look out and go, right, okay, who am I judging and what am I judging here? Like when I see certain people, what thoughts are coming up for me, and really sit with those biases and judgments and kind of work through them. Because like, you know, woman to woman, we want to help each other succeed. We shouldn't be looking out and going, well, that's right for her, or she doesn't know what problems are, because we've all got our own problems. And yes, of course, there's absolutely no denying that some people have gone through things that I couldn't even imagine having to go through. But on our own personal journey, we have our own little battles. And they look different from person to person. But we all work hard. We all have fears. We all have self-doubt. There's not a single person who has ever not had a bit of the imposter syndrome, who hasn't thought, I'm just going to sack it off. I care what everyone thinks too much. We all do it. And I think we've just got to realize that we all do it. We're not going to magically get rid of this stuff and all of a sudden we're Amy Porterfield. Amy Porterfield probably wakes up some mornings and says, I can't show up like this. I don't feel attractive. I haven't got the confidence, and doesn't doubt her intelligence sometimes or ability to do something. We all do it. And I think that's what we've got to remember.
That is absolute gold, Natalie. That is pure gold. It is offensive. And so I'll tell you, a few years ago, I struggled to leave the house that because I was overweight, that people wouldn't really want to look at me. And I know that's quite crikey. I look back now and think, oh my gosh. Now, where that came from, how it got there is beside the point. But I actually really believed. And so I tried to hide myself. And I wasn't hugely, grossly wobbling down the road. It wasn't like that. But what it was connect to my self-worth and my intelligence. Because for some reason, my brain had decided, based on what I saw around me, that I couldn't be organized and clever and do all the things because I couldn't control my weight. And therefore, when people saw me, they would instantly know that I wasn't the person who I couldn't show up and they couldn't take advice from me, because actually, if I can't sort that out, how can I be this organized person that does everything? And that is based on what you said about the perfectionism, about being perfect. I had a very skewed view of what I thought people were going to respond to more. And I was very much caught up in the whole world of what we look like and how we judge people. And I was, based on what you've said before, I was judging everybody based on my own perceptions. So what I mean by that is that I then put those perceptions into everybody else's minds. And I thought, if I'm judging everybody on what they look like, because at that time it was a big thing, that means everybody else is as well. And that's not true. And it was a real struggle for me to have to say, okay, look at this person. They are showing up and being successful. Now, on one hand, I was saying to myself, they're just covering it up. Secretly, they wish they were thin, because you saw them in the media. Oh, I've managed to lose this. I've done this. And they even had praised when they'd lost weight. And then the following year, you'd see their story of the misery that they'd been through in those struggles. They actually went through the struggles and how much it ate away at them. Do you remember the lovely lady? And I remember her because she's got the same name as you, Natalie Cassidy. She was from EastEnders.
I do remember her, yeah.
I saw a fascinating interview with her recently. She had put on quite a lot of weight. She was growing up. I think she was in her 20s. And then she got paid a large sum of money to do all these fitness videos, and she lost a ton of weight. And basically what had happened is they'd showed up at her door and said, we're going to give you all this money. You're going to train hard. You're going to lose weight, and you're going to do a fitness video because you're hot right now. And this is how to make money. And she said that it was some of the worst years of her life. Because firstly, she was told you need to do this because obviously successful people are thin. And those are the images we see around us on the TV and the media. Our brain associates that, doesn't it? It's like you said, it's that marker of success. And so we're bringing in that marker of success into our own world. And there's a minefield in itself, because we all have different body types. We all have different skin tones. We all have different levels of hormones and fitness. And so it's nigh on impossible for us all to be like that. Anyway.
Yeah, the thing is, we could all sleep the same, eat the same, go on a live and say exactly the same things. And different people would like us and different people would not like us. Because, we eat the same, we exercise the same, we're never going to look alike. We try and emulate people, and whether we're trying to emulate how they look, we can't do anything that's going to make us look exactly like someone else. I could do 1,000 sit-ups a day. I'm probably still not going to get a washboard stomach like someone else on Instagram. And I could watch someone's live and think, I really like what they said. I like how they said it. And I could regurgitate that word for word. And not only would it probably not come out the same because I don't talk like them, it also wouldn't land the same. And that wouldn't be me talking authentically. And I think we hear all the time, like, stay in our own lanes and not get distracted by the outside noise, not allow other people to come into our world. And it was funny when you said before, Kate, with the misunderstood thing, it really resonated because I was listening to, I think it was a clip on Instagram, and it was Jay Shetty talking. I love a bit of Jay Shetty. And someone was interviewing him and asked him, what is the one thing that you don't value or care about that other people do? And he said, being understood. He said, I used to spend years trying to be understood by other people. I thought I needed everyone to understand me and to understand my thoughts and my views, but I don't. So I don't care if people misunderstand me anymore. And I thought that is so true. Like, we think of like politics and whatever it is, we think everyone should think like us. Like, me and my partner will have conversations and I can see him and he's just like, he cannot comprehend the fact that I'm not seeing it the same way as him. And I'm doing the same because we're showing up in our truth, expecting that everyone else's truth is the same, and it isn't.
That is absolute gold. It really is. And that was the shift in myself. It's about accepting, in the olden days, you can't be a model unless you're 5'8". So if that's what you wanted to do growing up, and suddenly you were only going to be 5'2", you have to accept, I'm going to have to do something else in my life. And it's as simple as that, isn't it? If you want to be out there, I had to recognize and I come to that shift in myself. It's too hard. It's so draining. It's too much hard work trying to be all things for everybody. And it's just not possible, because what it means is that we drop the ball somewhere. And then when we drop the ball somewhere, that just adds to our own poor sense of self-worth. So to sum up, Natalie, this has been one of the most amazing conversations I've had, and Behind the Strategy is what the podcast is called. And so let's just have a little sum up of what we've pulled together. So we've been talking about self-worth and how it's impacted us in different phases of our life, different ages, and what we see out there online, what we see in the media. And it's about the teachings that you teach is about accepting who we were, who we are, having the confidence to let that be. And it's one thing to say, I accept myself for who I am. But if we don't truly believe that, because the markers of success that we have set ourselves are somebody else's values, then we can't step into that acceptance. We still feel like, well, okay, I accept I am for who I am, but I still feel that I haven't actually done this. And so I'm not that brilliant because I haven't achieved that. Why do we need to achieve that? Where does that come from? So Behind the Strategy, I would say what we've pulled together here is about looking at your beliefs, looking at your values. Let's get that down deep and dirty. Where do they come from?
Yeah.
Whose are they? Do we want to throw them away? What do we want going forward? What's going to make life easier?
That's it. And do you know what? Behind everybody's strategy is just someone doing their best. Behind your strategy is you doing your best. Behind my strategy is me doing my best. And both me and you, we work in very different ways, doing very different things. But our aim is to help other people do their best at what they're doing. And to be honest, doing our best is all we can ever hope for.
And that is the best advice as well that we can give everybody today. Natalie, this has been such an amazing conversation with you. Thank you so much for joining me today in Behind the Strategy. Really looking forward to speaking with you again as well. So, there's going to be other things coming up. Is that your gold tip? Just remember, everybody is doing the best they can. And if we can hold on to that, it just brings everything down a peg or two, doesn't it?
Yeah, and your best, however that looks that day, is always good enough.
Fantastic. Natalie, thank you so much for being here. This has been an amazing peek behind the strategy with you.
I've loved it. Thank you, Kate.
You've just listened to a Strategy Success Lab production of Behind the Strategy with Kate Whitley, bringing you inspiring guests and motivating messages to challenge your perspective and simplify your strategy.
Don't forget to subscribe and pop over to strategysuccesslab.com for more exciting episodes. And if you've loved this episode, go and share it with someone else who needs it today.